Hey there, welcome to Board Game Hot Takes. My name's Tim.
And this is Chris.
This is Adam.
And today we're going to be discussing our top 5 favorite small footprint games. We may have some different definitions of what that means, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. As always, though, before we get into the main topic, I've got a poll that we asked out on social media, and we can talk about that first. It actually is related to this topic. So the poll I asked was, does the footprint or table space of a board game on the table have an impact on whether you'll purchase a game? On Facebook, 6% said yes, I like the table presence of larger games. 9% said yes, my table won't fit huge games, so I prefer smaller games. And 85% said no. So the majority of people said they didn't care. They're going to buy the game if they want it, regardless of the table size. But there was a lot of comments. We got a lot of chatter on Facebook as well as on our Patreon page about this poll topic. A lot of people had thoughts on it. How did you guys answer this?
Yes, it does matter to me. I get overwhelmed and stressed out by giant board games. I don't care if it has maybe one giant board, but if there's a ton of associated components and all this extraneous stuff that you got to set up. So to the extent that it's going to be, extra setup time and then a sideboard here and these cards need to go over here and then shuffle this, shuffle that. I don't want to deal with that. That's too much for me. You guys know my story. I get scared of Tricarion. I had to sell that thing. And Acrony, I couldn't handle it. So Tim, you bought that one off me. Tainted Grail, Chris, you took that one off my hands. I have a history of being very attracted to these large footprint, big box games, but not anymore. They're just too much for me. It's too much setup time. I just want to get to the gameplay. I want to set it up, get the rules out of the way, have some simple rules, and then start playing the game. So anymore, I'm going to avoid large footprint, long setup games.
Adam has a long history of being really attracted to these big games, but then they never treat him well, so he leaves them.
It's
so sad. It's such a sad story.
Looks are superficial, Chris. It's I should have learned that lesson long ago, but I keep having to learn it over and over again.
Oh, man. Well, I'm just like you, except I don't leave my games behind. We answered yes on this one because there are definitely situations where the footprint of the game makes a difference to me. And it goes in both directions, both big and small. And I can give you examples. One of them is Azul Travel Edition. And that one I very specifically bought because it had a very small footprint and I wanted something that was convenient and able to travel with. I actually travel with my regular version of Azul, but then even that was big enough that I wanted something smaller. So I bought one specifically because of the footprint. On the large side, I'm kind of like you, Adam. I like games that have a big table presence. And so I'm not sure I would say, yes, this game has such a big table footprint that I'm going to buy it. But it does tend to make me more attracted to a game if it has a big, impressive table presence. And a perfect example of that is Return to Dark Tower. I mean, that game is massive. It takes up a huge table. It's got big toys, and that is very attractive to me. And so both for the sake of having a large footprint and having a small footprint, I am certainly capable of being swayed by the footprint of the game.
Yeah, I said no on this, and because I won't exclude games because they're large, and I won't only pick games because they're large. But there are situations, I think. It depends on the game to some extent. And I didn't have this in one of the poll options. That's probably why everybody answered no on this one. But it's kind of situational. It's like there are some games I feel like this would be great to play with a more casual group, so it doesn't need to take up the whole table. And then there are some bigger games that I'm like, screw it. We have a huge dining room table downstairs. Even though it wouldn't fit on my game table, I can make this work. Like Wonderlands War is a great example. I can't play Wonderlands War 4 players on my game table. It doesn't fit. So I got to go down to the big dining room downstairs to use it. So yeah, I probably don't normally make the footprint a big choice. But that being said, I like having some small footprint games in my collection and in my library. It makes it easier to get some games out. And a lot of our listeners commented about how the ease of the games is partly what drives them to small footprint games. So I'll jump into some of those right now. Over on Facebook, David said, I voted yes to preferring smaller games, but it's less about actual table space and more about setup time. Usually the game with large footprints also have lengthy or fiddly setups that discourage me from playing them. It's not a hard and fast rule, but a game that has a large and time-consuming setup has a high bar to clear. And then John said, I can't help myself. I'm often attracted to table hogs. Plus, games with expansions often have a bigger footprint after pulling out more stuff. I'd buy a bigger table rather than go with smaller footprint games. Then there are my accessories, dice tower, deck holders, card stands, deluxe dashboards, the box lid prop for scenery. Yeesh.
I love it. I love it.
Couple different, very different points of view there. Over on Blue Sky, Christopher said, absolutely. I don't always enjoy reaching over a huge amount of space. This is especially true if I'm thinking about soloing a game. And on Patreon, Kara said, so to be honest, I would like to own some bigger games because heck yeah, big stuff seems exciting. Sadly, big stuff comes with a price, so it's rather my student loans rather than my table size that's keeping me back. And if my table was too small, I wouldn't hesitate to get down on the floor. That's where my love for board games started anyway. That's awesome. Have you guys ever played a board game on the floor? Have you ever had something that you just put out a modern board game, set it up on the floor, and went to work?
Back when Wonderland's War first got here, the house was under renovation, so we didn't have any like tables to go to. We had one room in the back. The old primary bedroom was in the back. It was the family kind of living room at the time, and that's like the only spot in the house that we had. The kids were asleep in their rooms or what we were using for the rooms at the time, so we tried to set up Wonderland's War on this little patch of open floor back there, and it worked. We got pretty far into it before we got too tired and fell asleep and packed it all up.
Hell no, dude. I'm way too old to be sitting on the damn floor. And when my son occasionally will be like, hey, let's go play a game. And I'll say, sure, that's great. He'll start setting it up on the floor or even on like the coffee table where I have to like sit on a couch and lean forward. And I'm like, dude, you get up off that damn floor and get over to the kitchen table or the game table.
I can't remember having to make use of a floor, but I have played on several beds. I travel a decent amount, and sometimes the hotel rooms won't have they won't have like a table that you could actually set up on. So if my wife are traveling, we may just bust out a card game out on a bed and just lay it out and try not to move too much so that everything goes bouncing all over the place. The last comment on Patreon I was going to read, Matt said, all I can say is Mr. President. And several people commented, I don't know, have you guys seen Mr. President? This is a new GMT game. It's a solo only game, and it takes up like 2 full-size dining room tables to set up. It's insane. You got to look at a shot of it, Chris, a picture of it online. It's funny. So a couple of people mentioned that's bringing it over the top for a footprint at this point. In any case, so we're talking about small footprint games today. And I'm curious, before we jump into our list, I mentioned that small footprint, I think it's useful for me at least to consider that it's not small boxes. Like I would like to do an episode at some point that is big games in small boxes. Some publishers are doing great jobs of putting pretty good, decent sized Euros in tiny little boxes these days. And that's not what we're talking about today. What I'm talking about is things that don't take up a lot of space on a table. In fact, for me, when I was going through this list, I said, could I play it on an airplane on airline trays? And I think all of my games would fit on airline trays, but they would also fit if I'm sitting at a bar, at a little bar tabletop with another friend having a cocktail. We could fit on one of those little tables, or food's being served. We got appetizers out there. We could set it up and eat there. So when I was talking small footprint, that's what I had in mind. How about you guys?
Yeah, that was sort of my criteria as well. The games that you could play at a restaurant, or that I have played at a restaurant before. So that was my cutoff. So even if it came in a tiny box, a lot of these tiny box games are going to have a lot of cards. You're going to have to fan out and do this and do that, put this thing over here and this thing over here. So yeah, a tiny box did not necessarily equal small footprint for me.
Man, you guys are so literal. I mean, I wanted to talk about games that have small footprints, of course, because that's what we're talking about. But it doesn't mean that it has to fit on a tray table in an airplane. I mean, that's ridiculous. No game fits on that. So I think I was a little bit looser with the definition, maybe a little bit more like small footprint or small relative to what one might expect for what you're getting or that sort of thing. But I'll get into more detail about that when I start talking about my specific games.
All right, fair enough. Well, let's just jump into our top 5.
My number 5 game, Tim was gracious enough to donate this game to me. Not literally, I own this game because I bought it, but for this list. This is Skull I'm talking about, the game of coaster bluffing designed by Hervé Marley and published by Louis Mim Games and a bunch of other publishers in all over the country. Such a little tiny production, but the one I have has this beautiful art, kind of Dia de los Muertes art with these different sets of coasters that all have a unifying set of skulls on them. What you're trying to do is you're trying to put out your skull face down, or is it a skull or is it a flower? You don't know. It goes face down around the table. You have, 4 or 5 coasters that you start with, these circles, and once it gets back to the first person that put one of these coasters down, You can either put another coaster down, or you can decide to start bidding and say, I think I can pick, say if there's 5 players at the table, I think I can pick 2 of these I for sure know are flowers. And the next person is either going to, well, go for it, or they say, no, I can do 3 of these are flowers. I know which ones. I can pick 3 and I'm going to be safe. I'm going to make it through. And so, it's sort of a push your luck. Is the next person going to go 4 out of 5 are not going to be skulls, is what they're saying. And then they can pick them. So say that person that bid 3, the next person's like, nope, go for it. Then they start flipping up coasters, and maybe they get the first one. And then maybe, because Chris only plays skulls, every time he plays this game, he picks Chris, and it's a skull, and then you bust. So you lose one of your coasters at that point if you pick somebody's skull. And if you lose all your coasters, you're out. And if you have coasters left at the end, then you're the winner. I think that's basically the rules. But anyway, it's basically what you'd think. You have these slightly larger than pint glass size coasters that you're using for this game. And maybe you have, I think it plays up to, well, it's right here. It says it plays up to 6 people. So 6 sets of circles is all you need to play this game. It is absolutely fantastic. The bluffing and the push your luck, the sort of laugh out loud and what the heck are you doing? How could you possibly do that? So many great moments come from such a tiny game with such a beautiful production. That's Skull.
That's a great game, Adam. I love the choice. I do have a question, though, which I kind of was thrown by the first time that we ever played this. You kept calling the tiles, the circles, coasters. And sure enough, I mean, they really do look like coasters. And, we had talked about this in the context of like, hey, this is a game you go play at a bar, all of which makes you think, I mean, are these really coasters? I mean, I don't think you want to be putting your glass on your game pieces, because that would be kind of ganky. And I just like, what's the intent there?
No, I think, Chris, this was actually a old bar game that somebody put in a box and like some nice artwork on. This was just like, you could literally play this with just coasters, where you take everybody has 4 coasters and you write a skull on the bottom of one of them and flip them over. So you can literally you can make this in a bar next time you're hanging out. Just ask for a few extra coasters from your bartender.
That is pretty cool.
Yeah, this is a great pick, Adam. And in fact, you could play this on airline tray tables.
I think you totally could. Perfect. I think that's accurate, Tim.
Well, my number 5 game is one that you most certainly cannot play on an airplane tray table. It is Age of Galaxy, designed by Jeffrey CCH and published by Ice Makes Games. And the theory behind this one is, it's not so much that this game is super tiny. It's small, but it's not tiny. But it's way smaller than you'd expect for a game of this size and weight and concept. It's essentially a 4X game, and I'm not going to go into the rules because so much of this game is really all the normal things that you'd anticipate getting in a 4X package. It's going to have technology tracks and exploration and resource management and a lot of the things that we're very familiar with. But what makes this game unusual, and we commented this when we did a review on this, it was probably a year and a half ago, give or take, maybe. We did the full review. But it's a game that is so much bigger than you would anticipate from the package that it comes in. Little package, the board, rather than having this gigantic board that sprawls out over the entire table, you have 4 or 5 roughly tarot-sized cards that make up the universe that you're traveling through. And you have little mini player boards that are small in their cardboard, and some tokens that are nice little tokens that are very, very basic and small. But all of this stuff packs in this really intense, pretty legitimate 4X action. Now, I will say this is a game that I thought, and I think at least one of you guys, I don't remember who, thought actually does suffer to some degree from the smallness of the production. It's a game that could handle a really big production. It packs a lot of game in there. When we played it, I didn't even love this game for that reason. On a second play, I warmed up to it a little bit. When the review that we played, I don't think I was super enthusiastic about it. I enjoyed it more the second time, and then I think we may have played it a third time, and I liked it even a little bit more. But if you're someone who craves 4X action and you want to have something you can travel with, I cannot think of a single other game that is going to give you the experience that Age of Galaxy does in a package this small.
Yeah, there's something to be said about small footprint games can also be travel size games. That's a great call out, Chris. But this one I think is actually a really great pick. It is not, it's not something you can play on a little bar table necessarily, but it doesn't take much more space than that. So it's very, very small. It's going to fit on any kind of normal table. You could even play this on a little Denny's size table as long as your food hasn't been delivered yet. So I think this fits. And like you said, a lot more game in the footprint than you would expect.
Tim, I like playing this one at Denny's. I like having my pancakes. I like pouring the syrup right next to it and just risking it all with the syrup right there, and have my kids right across and knocking their forks everywhere and ketchup and stuff. It's fun, and you're really pushing your luck with getting all sloppy all over this one. But no, this is when we did this category, we brought it up, immediately I thought of Age of Galaxy and the tiny little box it comes in, and how much I miss playing this game. It's beautiful, especially the cards, the cards, the different aliens, all the different factions, and all the information packed on these little cards is fantastic. I want to go back to this one tons because there is so much game. I think game per box size ratio, this has to be one of the highest. Age of Galaxy.
That's a good way of putting it, Adam. That's a very good way of putting it.
All right. Well, my number 5 here is a game by Stefan Dora called For Sale. And this was published by Eagle Griffin Games. For Sale is a card-based game, but it's a great little auction game about real estate. And it's really just 2 decks. It's there are some little coin tokens as well, but one deck is just basically images of different types of real estate from 1 to 30. And like number 1 is a cardboard box on the corner of the street. Number 30 is a space station. But basically, you just have these different levels. And what you're doing is you're bidding on them. So every player starts with like 15 coins. And so you basically lay out in the first hand, you just put out a random number of these real estate cards for the number of players. And then each player is going to basically bid on how much they're willing to pay for it. It's an open bid. So I might say I'm the first bidder. I'm going to say 5, and the next person has to bid 6 if they want to beat me on it. But you've got a limited number of coins, so you have to be careful about bidding too high. But after you do those 4, you go to the next round, and you keep doing that until all 30 cards are gone. Once all the real estate's bought up, then you want to sell your real estate. And the way you do this is that there's another pile of money cards, and the money is anywhere from $0 to $15. And so 4 of those will randomly be put up. So you could have like a 1, a 5, a 9, and a 15. Those get flipped up. And so you're trying to get the best money there. So everybody is now going to put one of their real estate cards face down and then reveal them at the same time. And whoever gives up the highest number gets the highest dollar card in there. So it's a really fun, both the open auction at the beginning and then the blind bidding for the best money later on. Goes quick. It plays up to like 6 players. I think this is a great game for like 4 to 6 players. And that's one of the reasons why I picked it, because for a very small box game, it does a great job at that. You could play this on an airline tray table. You could play this at any restaurant. It's tiny footprint, but a lot of fun game in there.
Tim, this game sounds great. I hear about it all the time. I've never played it. I want to play it so bad. I don't think you talked about the art in this one. It's fantastic, cartoony little art. You have all these different places you could live, from a lighthouse to an RV to this little beach shack that's on stilts to this mansion or a space hotel I see in there, some little house on an island with like a kraken in the background. So just some silly little buildings you could live in, and with cute, fantastic little art and cantilevered thing over a lake cliff. The game looks fun. I have never played it, heard a lot about it. I really want to play this one.
Well, when you said this, Tim, I looked it up, and I just want to make sure that people are clear that we're not talking about the 1985 For Sale designed by Lawrence Voidovich and published by Century 21, the real estate broker. So this is a totally different game.
Thanks, Chris. I'm sure that a lot of people would have been confused about that. So thanks for clearing the air there.
The art is much cooler on your version.
Next up for me, when we were opening, Chris and I were on before Tim showed up. He was doing voice lessons or something. He needs to sound better on the radio, so he's working on that. But I was worried my list was going to aggravate Chris, and this is one of the games that I thought would infuriate him. This is High Society, designed by Rainier Knizia, published way back in 1995. The edition I have was by Osprey Games. So first of all, the art is just beautiful on this one. I think there are only, 10 or 11 tarot size cards that you're going to bid on each time. Everybody has a stash of cash. The cash is also beautifully done. I think it's about $96. I counted it up one time in funky denominations, like a 25 and a 20, and then maybe like a 15, and then 10 through 1 that everybody has. I don't know if that's 96 or not. Somebody else can check me on the math. But what you're doing, you're going to see all these tarot cards as they pop up. So some of them will double your score. Some of them are like -5 points. Some of them cancel the last card that you took. Some of them cut your points in half. So some of them are bad, and most of them are good. There's like 3 or 4 that are bad, that are detrimental. And so there's the 2 different types of auctions. One, you're bidding to not take the card, and the other one, the highest bidder gets the card. So you have these 2 different auction types. It's a fun cat and mouse. Then you have the usually annoying Rainier Knizia twist at the end. In this case, it's if you're the one who spent the most money, then you're broke. So you can't be part of this high society that everybody else is in, and you can't win the game. So you're, competing to be the highest score, but if you spend too much money, you spend the most money, you can't win. You're ineligible for winning the game. This one's quick. It's in a tiny little box. It's got beautiful, crazy Art Nouveau style art, and I love this one. Chris, you need to come back to this one and give it another shake, I think, because it's pretty fun.
I'm sorry, what? I think I drifted off there.
Fair enough.
I have such a great memory of playing this game at like 3:00 in the morning after many conversations and drinks in the hot tub in Palm Springs after one of our long gaming days. And Chris just the look on his face the whole time, confusion, frustration. I'm not sure what it was.
When I bring a game that makes people angry to the table, at least it only takes like 10 minutes. I mean, you guys bring like we had stuck playing Ark Nova, and it's like 3.5 hours of
I can't argue with that logic. Yeah. That is legitimate. That is legitimate. All right. So my number 4 game is another one that is, again, not super tiny, but it is small and lots of big fun. And that's Watergate, designed by Matthias Kramer and published by Frosted Games. This is a game that's on the smaller side, although it is not tiny. It's also a 2-player game only. And it's one of, I think, the most tightly packed chunks of theme you can possibly get in a board game. The idea of Watergate, as one might guess, and we probably talked about this one before, but I'll just give a little bit of a recap. One player is the Washington Post and one player is the Nixon administration. And throughout the course of the game, you're basically playing a tug of war on this track along the right side of the board. And it actually just depends on what side you're sitting on. But you're playing this tug of war where you're trying to move tokens and evidence to your side of the board. And then at the end of a round, you get to claim evidence or claim benefits from the tokens that move. And if the other side, the other player has the tokens or the evidence on their side, then they get to take them. And then they're placed out on this board, which has got this really classic, cool looking reporter's bulletin board where you've got in the center, you've got the president, and all along the outside, you've got all of his co-conspirators and string connecting them. And your goal as the editor is to try to use the evidence that you find to connect the president to 2 co-conspirators. And as the president, you're trying to basically survive your term without getting kicked out of office and having the newspaper find you out. But it's a simple game, and it is a pretty small footprint. The first time I ever played this, I was sitting actually on a little picnic table at a small restaurant, and it was super easy to play. And it's also pretty easy to set up. That was one of the things that I was thinking about when I was thinking about games that were small footprint, but also that had a relatively simple setup. A lot of times those two things go together, because if you've got a whole bunch of stuff out there, you probably have a lot of things you have to set up as well, and like multiple decks of cards and various other such things. In this game, it's pretty small, and it's also super quick. I mean, it's a 5-minute setup, and you get a lot of game in there. And mostly the thing I'm so charmed by with this game is you get a ton of themes. So if anybody is interested in a small 2-player game that immerses you in really historical context, and theme, then this is probably a great game to check out.
Oh, what a charming time we lived in when a president would resign just for wiretapping their opponents. This is a great pick, Chris. A good choice. It's a game I haven't thought about for a little while, but I would love to try it again at some point.
Yes, another one, Chris. I love this game. I remember, Tim, we played this one 5 years ago or whenever it was, and it's such easy rules, and the cards kind of tell you exactly what you're supposed to do. What a cool game. Yeah, I like that yarn, that newspaper, the sort of connected dots of like, oh, this guy's connected to here from this thing, and oh, that leads me to Nixon. All right. And then the tug of war over on the right side, that's also cool. Could be a little bit frustrating sometimes. I don't know. There's some nuances with that tug of war that make it a little more interesting than just a straight tug of war. That's another game I want to go back to and play. Watergate.
All right. So I think there's a good kind of group of games that you could count that would be great for small footprint, and that's roll and write games. There's a lot of great roll and write games where you don't have a central board. Everybody's got their own little piece of paper and a pencil and maybe some dice, and that's all you got. And I played a ton of these. Any one of them could have made this list, but my favorite still to this day is Rajas of the Ganges, the Dice Charmers. This was designed by Incan Marcus Brand and published by Hooch. This is a really great combo-y little roll and write where basically you're going to roll on your, if you're the active player, you're going to roll 6 dice in the middle of the table. You're going to draft one of them and then set the other one of that type aside. So only the first player is he's going to be the only one that gets one of the 2 of that type of color dice that round. But after they make that pick, then the other players around the table get a pick as well. And whatever you draft is going to basically correspond to a section in there's kind of 4 sections on this little sheet of paper that you've got your roll and write board. You mark that off, and a lot of these things will combo up. You mark one section, oh, you just triggered this combo next to it, so go to this other section and mark that. I love how this works. It basically is it's a remake, or it takes a lot of the theme and some of the like iconography and stuff of the Rajas of the Ganges board game, but it does have that overlapping score track like Arc Nova does, where you've got the fame track on one side and the money on the other side. So that's, for me, that's really fun. And even though a lot of it doesn't feel like the Rajas of the Ganges board game, it's a great game. I love them both, but this is a great small footprint. It always amazes me when my wife and I sit down to play it. We're sitting across our big dining room table, and I've got one little sheet, and then there's like 5 dice in the middle of the table, and that's it. The table feels so empty when it's out there, but you could play this anywhere. Great game.
Yeah, that's a good pick with or a good call out with the roll and write games for small footprint, like the one Hadrian's Wall. Like, what an enormous game you can play on 2 sheets of paper, and that's all you. What do you need? Like, place to roll some dice, and then your sheets of paper and a pen. So a lot of game. Again, the game per box size ratio is pretty high on that one.
Hey, Tim, what is that little elephant guy sitting there?
That's actually just the little, so when the first player drafts one of the dice, you put the reserve dice, the other one of that color, in that little elephant. Nobody else can use it that turn, but also that's the first player token. So when you're first player, you get that in front of you so you can remember who the first player was. There is a way to spend, I think it's karma, to actually then take the dice and re-roll it. So it has to be kind of set aside and marked. So it has a function. The problem is, in fact, it's the only complaint that I have about this game, is that little elephant, you assemble it to put the dice in, but you can't just put it in the box. The box is just a little bit too short to put it in there. So you got to unassemble that elephant every time. Yeah, that's all it does. You don't even need it at all. It could not be in the box.
Up next for me, this is a big time cheat. I was going to talk about Scout, but we've talked about Scout a lot. So I'm going to talk about a different card shedding game, or ladder climbing game, if you like. This one is 5-3-5. I played this one. Tim, you came over one time and played this one with, I think, Sarah and Danielle.
Yeah.
So this one has a little bit more nuance to it. The rules are a little bit different, but that adds to the gameplay. It looks a little more interesting. So 8s are the most powerful rank in this set of cards that are numbered from 1 to 15, except there's no 6s or 10s. That's weird, right? So 8's kind of in the middle with these outer as you go towards the ends. 6 and 10 are not in there, but all the other cards are in there. If you play 8, that clears it. So a lot of these games, you play this, certain cards, an ace a lot of the times will clear it, or a 2 or something will clear the cards, and then you get to lead the next hand to start the next, the bottom of the next ladder, if you will. And in this game, you can do all kinds of weird stuff so quickly. You can play just a single card or one. And then if you're the next player, you can add to it. You can make it I'm going to add a 2 to this. Now we got a run and 1, 2. And then you can add so you can kind of change it going from a singles to a run. Or you can play sets of cards, 1, 1, 1 or 3, 3, 3, something like that. And so that's all you're trying. You're just trying to get rid of all your cards and strategically do that. But with these funky set of rules where 8s are the strongest. Also, a lower run is better than a higher run. So like a 1, 2, 3 beats an 11, 12, 13. So you can mix and match. You can kind of pivot.
Now, why do they have to do that? See, that's the thing about these games. Is they're making them to make them interesting. They're making them so complicated. I played this with you, and I didn't know what the heck was going on until about the final hand of the game, which is it makes it fun and interesting. But why completely shift the normal paradigm just to change things up? Like, I'm not so sure about that. And in fact, I think this whole trend of like trick taking and shedding games, which are great games, but they're just like consistently trying to get more convoluted just to be different. And I'm not sure I like that.
No, that's a fair point. But what I hear, the more I hear about this one, the more I hear that there is a lot of nuance, and that's actually an interesting point of the game. So you can shift if someone does play that single. Yeah. You can start making it a run and making the lower, someone plays a 14, they think it's strong, and you play a 13 underneath that. Now it's really weak because it's this very worthless type of run. So a little bit of nuance there with the card play. But yes, you make a good point. The rules are a little convoluted, but I think it's a great game. I have this one sitting here, a tiny little box. It's just a deck of cards and some little scoring trackers, and that's about it. Beautiful production. The one I have is from the Portland Games Collective up by you, Chris. If you try to find this one on Board Game Geek, Oh Meow Bow is going to pop up, which is what 535 was adapted from. So originally it was designed by Kenichi Kabuki, I believe in Japan. But yeah, this one was brought to the United States as 535 by the Portland Games Collective. It's a beautiful game, I think. Lovely art, just a small, tiny little footprint, some tokens, some chits to keep track of your score, and a nice little first player poker chip as well. That's 535.
I was wondering about that, Adam, because I looked it up and I kept coming up with that. And I'm like, is this a broken link or something? As it kept coming up with this oh meow bow. So now I see the 535 piece of that.
So yeah, if you look over on the right, it'll show the 535 in the picture and stuff. Yep. And if you look at the photos, you'll see the 535 blended in with the oh meow bow.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and I don't want to be too harsh on it. I had a good time playing this and learning it. It's just like I've got this group of friends, like a bunch of people that I know that have been caught with this trick taking bug, and they're just buying tons. So every week, instead of getting to go back and explore another trick taker that we all love, we're going and like learning something new every week, and they're all just slight twists on the normal rules that we're playing. That's great. It's awesome that this kind of game type is really being rediscovered, and there's lots of great stuff being put out there. But
yeah, it's a fair point. Just stick with one or two weird ones and then get to learn those really well is what I say.
Yeah, that's my feel.
Well, I'm going to step away from trick takers because, like you just said, we talk about trick takers way too much. So we're going to...
Chris is like, if we ever talk about trick takers, it's too much.
No, not true. Not true. I actually thought about putting Scout on my list too. So I guess I'm giving a runner up there. But my number 3 game is actually the first one that's not really, I think, in any way a cheat. It's Calico, designed by Kevin Russ and published by Flatout Games. This one is truly a small footprint game. In fact, each player has a solid player board that has edges around it. So it's 2 layers. So you could even set this on your lap. You don't even have to have a table to play it on. And then you have to have a place where you put a couple of tokens out on the table that you get to draw, basically a market and some little cat and button tokens. So the idea behind Calico is you're quilting because, quilting, of course, for a board game. And as you're quilting, you're putting down these tiles, and there's a number of different patterns and there's a number of different colors. And when you put 3 color patches together, you get a button of that color. And when you put certain numbers and shapes of patterns together, not colors, but patterns, then you get to put a little cat token, which is big points on that because cats don't see color, so they're attracted to these patterns, and the cat wants to come and lay on your quilt. So very cute. And then on top of that, you have these design goals. There's these 3 tokens that go out on your board that give you goals that are incredibly difficult to get. So they might be a goal like every tile has to be a different color around this one patch, and or every pattern around that tile can be different. And if you manage to make it so that every color and every pattern around that tile is different, then you get these like really huge points. But so in other words, you're trying to get all of these different goals together in an extremely small space, because I think there's probably only something like space for 20 different tiles or 20 different patches on your player board. And so when you're playing this game, as simple and as kind of cutesy as it looks, this is a brutal brain burner of a game. It is about as punishing a puzzle as I think I can come up with in a board game. You know, Tim and I played this a while back, and it was just an absolute killer. In fact, we did a review on this one, didn't we?
No, I don't think so. We talked about it just that one weekend that I was out there, so we did discuss it a little bit, but I don't think we ever did any kind of full.
That's right. I'm actually confusing it with Cascadia, which has a lot of similar DNA to it. We did Cascadia, but we didn't do Calico. It was just when you and I had played. So, and anyway, a fun game, extremely difficult, and extremely simple rule set. So simple rule set, very simple setup, and a very small footprint, but packs a whole lot of puzzliness into that little box.
After 198 episodes, it is hard to keep track of all the games that we've reviewed on here for sure. But yeah, that game is great, and it is a very tough puzzle and a great small footprint game. Good pick, Chris.
Chris, this is one that I've never played. How often do you go back to this one? How often are you like, I really want to get my brain fried right now and try this puzzle, versus Cascadia? When do you take this one over Cascadia? Does that ever happen?
I actually just played this a couple of weeks ago. And the reason for that is that my wife really likes this game.
Okay.
And between the two of them, I am much more on the Cascadia side. I like the fact that Cascadia is less restrictive. It's more kind of an open world. She likes the puzzliness of it. I mean, she's the kind of, when she was a kid, she like did math puzzles for fun, which makes me want to just jump off a cliff. But
that's cool.
Yeah. But so she really likes it a lot, and it does share a lot of the same DNA with Cascadia. And for like a simple, quick game, it's super easy to get to the table. And so I definitely, I do pick to play one of those two games, and depending on who I'm playing with, may determine which way I go in a given case.
Gotcha.
I think marriages should be a lot like adventuring parties in Dungeons and Dragons, where you don't want two wizards, right? You need at least one barbarian and one wizard. You need the brute force as well as the spellcaster. So that's, Chris, that makes sense why you would have Rachel. You would have married Rachel. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think most marriage counselors would use that same analogy.
Yes.
Yeah. The good ones
would. All right. Well, my number 3 is a game I've talked about a decent amount, but it probably honestly should be number 1 on my list, because it's probably the first thing I will always think about when I think of a small footprint game. That's Sea Salt and Paper. It's a card game I've talked about a lot recently, but it is such a tiny footprint. You have a deck, you have 2 discard piles, and that's all that's in the center of the board. As you're playing some cards, you'll get a little bit of a tableau underneath your side of the table, but you could honestly just kind of stack them side by side. So this is a game that literally takes up like 1 square foot on a table, and you could get it played. Great game. I love going back to it. I won't talk a lot about it because I've mentioned it many times before, but this is a game I will always bring. It has every single trip I've taken in the last year and a half has had this in my luggage, and I get it played all the time.
Up next for me, this is another late pivot, everybody. This is pure excitement. I'm changing my list. I'm scribbling out everything. I was going to talk about Ghosts of Christmas, but Chris is sick of hearing about Trick Takers. Ghosts of Christmas is great and also a small footprint, but I'm going to switch it up. Chris inspired me with his quilting. I'm going to talk about Patchwork. This is by Uwe Rosenberg and published by Lookout Games in some variation of another. This game's cool. It's another strictly 2-player game. I heard that Uwe Rosenberg made this one while he was working on Feast for Odin, specifically the little Tetris-like pieces. Polyominoes is what they are. Tetris would imply only 4 squares. Poly means more than that or less than that. Anyway, you have all these different shape sizes of Tetris-like pieces, I'll say, and some of them have buttons on them, some of them don't. All of them have a hourglass on them. And what you're doing on your player board is it's a big blank quilt. So you're trying to fill in your grid. Once you put a patch in there, I believe subsequent patches have to be adjacent to that first patch that you put in there. And you want to, fill it all in. And every time you cross a little button on the, there's a little time tracker, little, thing that counts down towards the middle. It's a square or a circle-y spiral if you flip it over. And the hourglass that's on the little patch piece that you pick up that's within 1, 2, or 3 from your little player pawn, you're going to move that many spaces towards the end of the game. And once you pass this little button on that track, that's when you do your button income, of course, because you're quilting. So you're collecting all these buttons. That's how you pay for these patches that you're putting onto your quilt. So yeah, the currency in this game is buttons, which is cute, and you're buying patches to make your quilt. Also has this so yeah, I've said a little bit. The rules are super easy. I'll go into it just a little bit more. You have these little player pawns. It's the setup for this game is neat. You just scatter all the polyominoes in a wreath around the table, and then you put your little pawns in front of a specific piece, and that's where you start the game. You can pick any of the little polyominoes that are 1, 2, or 3 spaces away from your little fella, and then you march him into that spot, grab that piece, put it onto your player mat. The turn order thing is kind of neat. It's one that a lot of games use. So, there's an hourglass on each of these little polyominoes. That's how far you move down. And if you're still behind the player in front of you, you get to keep going. So a lot of the strategy of this game, I'm going to take this piece that's only going to move me once down this hourglass thing, and then I get to go again, and then maybe go one more time, and now I can go a third time and hit all these buttons and take this huge button income. This is a game I am exceptionally bad at. I could have used this on the last episode, games that I love that I'm horrible at, but I'm using it here for very small footprint games, little tiny box, a little bit sprawling the way you throw out the tetrominoes in a little circle wreath pattern, but it gets smaller and smaller and condenses as the game goes on, as you're putting them on your quilt, and these pieces are evaporating. That's Patchwork, incredibly fun game with Uwe Rosenberg, with art by Clemens Franz as one of the.
Seriously?
There's like 5 artists on this game. Yeah, there's like 5 artists credited on this thing. I don't know if each one did a different patch, different square, but kind of interesting point there. Anyway, Patchwork, fun game, small footprint.
There's actually a variation on this that I don't know if you guys have played, Patchwork Doodle, where the art is by you. You draw your own patches on a little roll and write style sheet. So I've played that one. I've not played this one, but it looks like a lot of fun. It's funny now. We've had 2 quilting games in this episode, and I'm thinking how, what a funny time we live in, that our modern board game hobby is dominated by like merchantry in pre-industrial Europe in quilting. What are the chances?
Well, I'm just waiting for the phase when it's all about the periodic table of elements and xenon and other chemicals. It needs to happen.
Well, Adam, it's funny because with my current love affair with Le Havre, I actually thought about Uwe Rosenberg. And by the way, we keep saying Uwe Rosenberg because that's how we thought we were supposed to say it. But then a couple listeners, German listeners, I think, have corrected me and said it's Uwe Rosenberg. So now I got to try. It's so hard. It's so hard, guys, to keep up with everything. Uwe. But in any case, I thought about this game, but it is quite sprawling. So I don't know that I would have considered it a small footprint, but it's smaller than a lot of games. So fair enough. Chris, I got a chance to play Patchwork Doodle because our friend Riley sent me a copy for my birthday last year.
Nice.
And I got to say, I was a little disappointed. And Riley, don't take it personally. I appreciate it was a nice thought, and we did try it, but I think the original version is just a lot more interesting. And I found the Doodle version just okay. It was fine. I would play it again, but not my favorite roll and write, not my favorite version of Patchwork. So there you go. Even I don't want to hurt your feelings, Riley, but I'm going to be honest. That's my role here as a reviewer. We've got a job to do.
I actually got my copy from Riley as well. And it has been a hit in our family. So I've even brought it on a camping trip last year and shared it with my family of non-gamers. And it was it ran the table, so to speak.
Chris, I remember you talking about that. You shared that on the show. And then I think I played this game. I got it from one of those little free libraries. It was in there. And then I talked about it. I was like, have you guys ever played this game? And you're like, I just talked about it last week, dude.
Oh, funny. All right. So number 2 on my list. This is a game I hadn't thought about in a long time, but I was thinking about what I might put on this list, and this one came to mind immediately. And I was shocked that I haven't played this more recently. In fact, it's one that I want to get to the table very soon because of just how fun it is. And that is Disney Villainous, designed by Aaron Donna, Prospero Hall, and Brian Kirk, and published by Ravensburger Games. This is one of that new genre of games that you can get at Target. I mean, you can buy, and I think for this one, they've got now like 50 different expansions to it, or not even expansions, because you can play them. You don't have to have a central board or a central. There's a play system, and each of the expansions is just more villains to play. So you can get all kinds of stuff. But the basic idea behind Villainous is that each player is a Disney villain, a famous Disney villain from the cartoons, from the movies, and each player has their own goals that they're trying to achieve. So it's got a lot of asymmetry. Each player is trying to accomplish their own goals. Each player is trying to stop the other players from achieving their goals. And there's a very simple game system. Each player has a very small footprint. So you basically have a player board, which is a track of different actions that you can take, which is about probably 3 or 4 inches by 6 or 7 inches, where you in a deck of cards and a really neat stylized little token that represents your player. You know, it has something that stylistically makes it look like the character from the movie, from that villain. And these actually are incredibly elegant little pieces. Very, very nice production. And the cards you're playing, you get to move around the board. You get to play your cards. One of the things that's particularly fun that you get to do is you get to play fate cards on your opponent. So if I'm, for example, playing the Ursula from The Little Mermaid, and Tim is playing, I'm trying to remember who's Jafar from Aladdin, I might play a fate card, and the fate card actually is going to be one of his heroes, the hero who's trying to stop him. So it might be Aladdin showing up, or the Abu, the little monkey that's going to get in the way of what he's doing and block off a space or make something more difficult. So there's lots of fun little thematic things you can do. And it all comes with a super small footprint. I mean, this is a game you could play. You probably could play this if you had 2 people sitting on an airplane next to each other. You probably could play this on the tables or at a bar or whatever. Super fun, packed with really nice production, nice art, lots of fun, especially if you're a Disney fan or a Disney super fan. This is probably one you already have in your collection. And I want to quote, or at least paraphrase, something Tim said, because I thought it was very prescient when you said it. We had talked about this on an episode when you had come out to visit me for a couple days, and we played a bunch of games. It was that this is a game that is way better than it had any business being, because Ravensburger could have taken these properties, these IPs, and just done a little bit of fan service, put some crappy stuff on cards, some rerun artwork, and done something extremely simple. But instead, they actually put together a really nice production and a really solid game. And on top of all that, it has a super small footprint, so you can play this thing anywhere.
Yeah, I stand by that. I haven't played it since I played it with you, Chris, but I was really impressed by this little game. And I know there's a bunch of versions of it. I keep being tempted to almost pick it up or pick up the Star Wars version of it, which, of course, I'm a big Star Wars fan. So it's a great pick and great small footprint on it as well.
Yeah, I've played this one way back in the day. I haven't played it in a long time. Which versions do you have, Chris? Do you have just the core? Do you have a couple of expansions? Do you have a preference of which characters you like to play?
Just the base version. And I've played all of the different characters in the base version. I think Prince John is my favorite just because he's just such a complete goofball. And I like his little crown icon that he's got there. But yeah, there is... I think at this point, probably they've done just about every Disney villain has got an expansion for this one, including Marvel, including Star Wars, including all the the base Disney cartoons. So, but for trying it out and getting a sense of how the game feels, the core box is great and has some of the classics.
All right. Well, my number 2 is a game that I'm so excited to talk about today. If we'd done any game review, this would have been my on the table conversation as well, but it's a perfect fit for this topic. This is Sky Team. This is a 2-player only co-op dice placement game, and I was just blown away by it. I didn't have a lot of interest. A co-op game, a 2-player only game what's the likelihood I'm going to get this played? Well, I can tell you that I loved it so much that I will be buying this game. It recently won the best 2-player game on the BGG Golden Geek Awards, and it totally deserved it. Really fun. So the way this works is that one player, you basically have a central board with some dice placement spots on it. And then the 2 players, the great thing about this is a co-op, you can't talk to each other. Once you roll your dice, you can't discuss the decisions. It's wonderful. It's like playing a solo game, but the random element is your partner sitting across from you. So what happens is one of you plays the pilot, one of you plays the co-pilot. You both roll 4 dice, and they're behind a screen, and you're going to take turns placing them. And you both have some roles that only you can do, but there's a couple things you have to do together. For example, basically the tilt of the plane. I'm going to use all the wrong terms. Adam's going to yell at me about this, but like the way that the plane is sitting, what do you call it? Tilt, or so like
attitude, the attitude,
the attitude. That's what it's called.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, okay, interesting. Yeah. So the attitude of the plane. So you both will play, like, let's say that I play a 3, and then my co-pilot plays a 5. Well, it's going to drift 2 angles towards the way because he played one that's 2 pips higher than I did.
So the motion you're making there that people can't see, that's the roll.
The roll. Okay, that's what I'm looking for. So the roll, basically the wings are going to, raise or lower. So it's going to roll the plane if we don't play the same dice there. And but that's okay if you're in the sky, as long as you don't roll too far. So if he plays a 6 and I only play a 1 on there, then the plane's going to crash. So there's a whole bunch of ways you can make the plane crash here. That's one of them. The other is that you basically you're going to be played over like 6 or 7 rounds, and each round you're going to slide down this card that kind of indicates how far away you are from having to complete your trip to get to the airport. And then this other card that slides down under the thing is basically how fast you're going. And so we're going to play 2 dice together, and if the dice together fit within this threshold of these 2 things that we've set on the board, then we're going to move 1 space, 1 movement. If it's below this threshold, we won't move it all that round, which means we have to catch up in a future round because we have to get to the airport or we'll crash. Or if we move it too high above this threshold, we'll move 2 spaces. And so in a future round, we'll have to make sure we don't move at all. So you have all this control over what the plane's doing. The pilot has to control the landing gear. So over the course of the round, they basically have to like put some specific dice to set up the landing gear and the brakes. And then the other person, the co-pilot, has to put dice in a specific order to set up the I don't know what they're called, the foils, the things on the wings that go up and down to change the direction.
The flaps?
Yeah, exactly. So sorry. So pilots everywhere are just rolling their eyes at me right now. But it's just great because you have to play together. There's this coffee mechanism where if you have an extra dice you don't want to use, you can place it and just get this coffee, which means later on someone can use the coffee, either player can, to change one of their dice pips on it. But because you're working together with the other person, but you don't know what they've got, it's a very fun, tricky situation. And there's a whole bunch of modules in this box. Like one of the modules I played with my friend was the intern module. And it's these little interns that you have to basically use dice, and they'll give you a random number to use. But if you don't use them all up by the end of the game, if you haven't trained all the interns by the end of the game, then you lose the game. But they may give you some ways to manipulate your dice. There's another module that as you're going through the air, it's going to put there's airplanes that you have to get. You have to like use your microphone. So you have to place a dice in your microphone to move airplanes out of the way to make sure that they get out of the airspace. So there's all these things you're interacting with, but one of them will make it so that at certain spaces, depending on how far you've traveled, you have to be at a certain tilt, or whatever Adam called it, a certain roll.
You have to have the right attitude.
You have a certain roll to make sure that you don't crash because of wind speed or something. I don't know. There's another one that's like a fuel thing where your fuel can run out. So there's all these great modules. In any case, it's a tiny footprint. It's this one little tiny board in the middle of the player area that you guys are going to place dice on together. And then you just have your player screen behind it. Beyond that, that's all you got for components. It's a small box, sets up quickly. This is a fantastic game. And since I played it in person, it's on Board Game Arena. So I played a couple of games with one of my local friends and had a great time with that as well, playing all around with some of the different modules. This game is fantastic. I'm going to pick this up and see if Danielle will get into it with me. I think she will. I think it's going to be fun. But you guys should try this. It's great.
Yeah, I've been wanting to try it. I'm hearing a lot about it. Obviously, it's winning all kinds of awards. People are reviewing it. How hard is it, Tim? Was it difficult or was it pretty easy? Did you ever lose?
So I haven't lost of the 2 games I finished. I'm in the middle of a third one right now, but of the 2 games I finished, I did win. Now, the first game I played, we played on easy, like kind of the easiest mode. And so it was fairly easy to plan for. And in fact, I would say it felt tricky throughout, but in the last round, it was like we had so many cups of coffee and like there was no way we could lose it basically. So it felt too easy, but I was like, okay, there's all these modules that will mix it up. So the next one I played, we played a little bit more challenging mode, and there were a couple times where we almost crashed, where like it was close to losing, but we still were pretty set up for the last round. But there's a lot of levels of difficulty in this game. So I think now that I know it, I'll start to play it with some more of this. I'm sure that it will be a challenge, a bigger challenge as you get a little bit deeper into it. So super fun, but yeah, we'll see if it stays. I'll report back on that, to be honest, because I think it's one thing that's concerned me after the first couple of plays is that the last round didn't feel like there was anything tough to do, but I don't think that's going to be common once you get some of these extra modules in there.
Okay.
So Adam, I mean, I don't feel like I'm really qualified to criticize your industry, but it seems like you'd want to let the pilot and the co-pilot talk to each other. Why don't you guys do that?
Yeah, we don't need to do that. That's basically, this game is how you fly an airplane. We just roll some dice, kind of hope that it works out, hope that we have the right numbers. Then we're kind of look at each other a little bit and give each other like a little wink, and hopefully the gear gets down. And then we drink a lot of coffee, and that's basically how we get from A to B.
You've changed my view of air travel.
It's totally safe.
Just fly in a Boeing and and make sure that pilot and co-pilot don't talk to each other and be sad.
Just don't be in a Boeing. Yeah, that's
doors popping off. Pilots
safe.
and co-pilots not talking to each other. Cats and dogs living together.
Yeah. All right, my number one game for small boxiness, small footprintiness is Shamans. This is a game I used to talk about all the time, but we haven't played it in a while, so I haven't had a chance to talk about it. I'm excited to talk about it. It's such a fun, designed by Cedric Shabusit and published by Studio H Games. So yeah, this game comes in a tiny, beautiful box with this kind of southwestern mystical looking art on it. You've got a little tiny game board in there. It folds out, and then as you play the game, it sort of turns into the backbone, putting cards around it, these sets of cards around it. And you've got a few little chits, a little beautiful peg, I don't know, the moon marker. This thing little marches down towards the moon. And that's it. That's all the components of this game. If you don't know Shamans, we haven't talked about it a while. It's one of my favorite games that's in existence. So there's hidden roles. You need at least 3. It's probably better with 4 or 5 players. Certain people are going to be shadows. Those are the quote unquote like bad guys. And certain people are going to be shamans. And it's not like the whole game. It goes in rounds. So each round, different people are going to be the shamans in the shadow. So it changes every time. And it's kind of a thrill if you're a shadow, because all the other guys, you're the minority. Everyone else is gunning for you and trying to take you out. So it can be kind of scary. There's one of the little chits in the game is you can change your role. You can change your card with somebody else. So maybe people are getting close to closing in on you, and then you can shift your card and give that to somebody else. There's a dagger. So if you're the shaman, one of the shamans, you want to try to dagger the shadow, and maybe that'll help you guys win the game. But conversely, if you're the shadow, you want to try to dagger the shaman, but it's not easy to do. You have to time it just right. You have to set things up to close out the suit just right. And if you close out a dagger suit, and you happen to have a dagger on you, then you get to use the dagger. So each time you close out a suit, it triggers a different little bonus. If you're the high card of that round in the suit, something happens. I think you get to lead the next round. If you're a low card of that suit, then you get to do something else. I don't know. I forget the rules of this thing. I just remember it's really fun, and it comes in a little tiny box. And remember, it was difficult, but you could set it up. There was just enough agency to take control of things if you worked it out just right. And this game gives me an absolute Thrill. That's Shamans, tiny box, big game, lots of fun. We played this one at the bar before. It's fantastic.
Such a great game, Adam. And it's such a weird combination of things that normally I don't find myself gravitating towards. I mean, it's got some social deduction in there. It's got some quasi trick taking in there, but it just all comes together in just such a neat package.
Yeah.
Great pick.
Okay.
All right. So my number one pick for small footprint games, this one you guys might have seen coming, but it's actually a game that I have played more of than any other board game ever. I think I have a total of over 13,000 games total under my belt on this one. And yet I don't think I've ever specifically brought it up on one of my lists on the show. And you guys even called me out for not bringing it up. And it is Star Realms, the deck building game, designed by Rob Doherty and Darwin Castle and published by Wise Wizard Games. Now, I'm going to expand this out a little bit and say that there's two other variations on this game that I think are equally fun, and it really comes down to how much expandability you want and, you know, what theme you're most interested in. But there's also Hero Realms, also designed by the same designers and published by Wise Wizard. And that one is more of, instead of space and science fiction, this one is more swords and sorcery and wizards and what have you. And then the third one is Cthulhu Realms, which was designed just by Darwin Castle and is published by Tasty Minstrel Games. And that one, needless to say, is Cthulhu themed, although kind of a whimsical, funny Cthulhu theme, which at first I thought was kind of sacrilegious. But the more I played it, the more I realized that it was actually delightful and hilarious in the way that it kind of spoofs some of the Cthulhu mythos. But all three of these games have such similar DNA that you could play any one of the three of these, I think, and have an equally fun time. Of the three, Cthulhu Realms is probably slightly more clunky than the other two, but I actually think it's really cool because it does some neat stuff that the other ones don't have, they don't do, and it's that the artwork is absolutely adorable. So Star Realms is my personal pick of the three, but I think any of those three are awesome. So like any deck builder, the idea behind Star Realms is that you're going to be playing, you're starting with this really crappy deck of base cards. So you have 8 cards that give you $1 to spend, or 1 credit, whatever you call it, and 2 that give you 1 point of attack to spend. And you're going to start playing these in 5 card hands. And then as you play those cards, you're going to be hitting your opponent with attack. And you're also going to be using those credits to buy cards out of a central market. And the more points you get, or the more cards you get, the more dollars you get to spend, the bigger cards you can get. And then you're sort of parlaying, your hand, making it bigger and bigger and better. Hopefully also scrapping cards so that you don't have as much of these garbage cards in your hand, and, getting rid of that stuff and improving the cards that you do have. Ultimately, the goal is to knock out your opponent's last health. So you're trying to knock them down to 0 health, and then you win the game. But it's a super small footprint. You're basically dealing with a market of cards, which you just have to have a place to lay out like 5 cards on a table. And you have to have a place to, set the cards that are in your hand, hold them in your hand, and have a discard pile. So really nothing to it. You can play it on an airplane. You can play it in a bar. You can play it anywhere. And it is so much fun. I will play Star Realms, Hero Realms, Cthulhu Realms till the day I die. 13,000 games in, and I still play multiple games of this a day, especially on the app, which has a great app as well. So I couldn't not put this one as number 1 on my list, especially for small footprint games.
Fantastic pick, Chris. And by the way, I've been playing a lot of the Star Wars deck building game with my wife the last few weeks. We just busted out again and got back into it. And it kind of reminds me of playing Hero Realms, where it took the Star Realms, mechanisms and then just added more words to it, which just slowed everything down. And I like what the Star Wars deck building game does in some ways. It's got some fun mechanisms, but I think I would always just pick Star Realms, like it's just easier to get into, it's easier to play, it's quicker to play. Star Realms is great.
I second and third everything you guys are saying. Star Realms it's tough to beat as far as deck builders go. It's fantastic. Great pick.
All right. Well, my number 1 is, listen, we're talking about small footprint games. There had to be a lot of card games on these lists, and there have been, but I have my current ladder climbing, shedding, game in the trick taking world right now that is just my preferred. It's the game that I've been playing a lot of and I love it, so it had to be on this list. This is Haggis. Haggis is a 2 to 4 player game, plays great at all those player counts, and it's a pretty traditional shedding game, which is partly I think why I like it. It's pretty easy to get into, but there are a couple special little rules with it. One is that all the players at the table have 3 wilds face up. You always start with a jack, a queen, and a king. So everybody knows that you've got wilds that you can add into a hand and make a bigger run, or that you can you can play 2 of them to make a bomb and beat something. But the trick of the game is, when do you use those? When do you draw those out from someone else's hand so that you know they can't beat your later bomb? There's a couple other bombs that if you play a 3-5-7-9 offsuit, all different colors, that's a small bomb. But if you play them all suited, then it's a huge bomb. So you can just really surprise somebody with a hand that they didn't think you could beat by just busting out one of these bombs and taking out the hand. This is fantastic. And I think it's especially great as a 3-player game because the way the scoring works, you almost have like whoever ends up bidding to go first that gets the Haggis, they're basically making a bet. And if they win that bet, if they end up being the first one to go out, they get all the points for that bet. And they also get an extra advantage of getting to discard a couple cards at the beginning of the round. But if they lose, the other players get to split the amount of that bet. So basically the other players are kind of working together to try to not let you be the first one to go out if you're the one that bet the highest. So it makes a little bit of a competition. I played another game that does a similar thing called Chimera recently. It's very cool, and that you're literally playing as a team against the Chimera in that one. So another one that's great as an example. But Haggis is my favorite right now, and in fact, I just got my copy from the Portland Game Collective with the new artwork on it and some little deluxe poker chips because I like this game so much. So fantastic one in this series, and a game that has basically no footprint on the table. It's just deal out a couple cards at the beginning of the round and win your tricks.
Tim, I was just gonna say this is a fantastic game. I had a chance to play this one. It's on Board Game Arena. I think it was you and I and Chris Prime, I believe, played this one a few times. And I had played it a few years back, but then going back to it and figuring it out and seeing how it kind of worked. What a fun game. You're right. The skill or the fun part of this game is trying to draw out those wilds and weaken somebody else's hand while saving yours and knowing when to drop those bombs or use those wild cards in a clever way. What a great game, Haggis.
So, Tim, I got a question that's kind of dumb, and I'm not trying to be funny. This is a serious question. So I only know Haggis as like the sheep's stomach stuffed with barley. It's like a food. And this doesn't look like it has any relation to that.
I don't have any idea what the theme is supposed to be here, Chris, but it does have a little bit of a kind of a Scottish Highland art style going with it. So I assume it is related to that food because I think that's a Scottish food. So yeah, but I don't know why it was named that. Yeah. Sorry, I can't help you there.
I was looking at the cards wondering if there's gonna be like a picture of a haggis on it. and I didn't see one. So I was just curious.
I will say that maybe one of the reasons I love this game so much is that I consistently beat my friend Mark, who I mentioned last week, beats me at almost every other game. So suck it, Mark. It's my favorite game now. All right, cool. Any runners up, you guys? I think that gets to the end of our list, but anything else you wanted to call out?
Yeah, I had a few runners up. A few of them already got mentioned. A lot of deck builders out there that are fantastic in small footprint. Star Wars, like you talked about, Tim, a little bit bigger footprint. That gets a little sprawling with all the little cubes and stuff going on with that. Star Wars is fantastic. And then Shards of Infinity, a little more wordy too than Star Realms. I still think Star Realms is a classic winner of that, but Shards of Infinity is a great deck builder as well. Cat in the Box for a trick-taking game. That is just a fantastic trick-taking game with a little bit of this sort of area control, or you're putting, trying to put cubes adjacent control. And then Cafe, a game I haven't talked about in a while. Cafe comes in this little box, has this mechanism where you're overlapping these big tarot-sized cards, bigger than tarot-sized cards, and trying to make your little coffee engine run. So there's some great other small footprint games, easy to travel with, and a lot of interesting gameplay in all those.
I actually got a chance to play Cafe, Adam, a few months back. I was visiting some friends out in California, and they had just randomly, I kind of introduced them into hobby board games, and so they'll pick things up once in a while when I get together with them. They're like, hey, check out this latest game we picked up. And they were traveling. I found this little thing at a coffee shop somewhere and brought it home with them. And it was super fun, really interesting little game.
It's fun. It's tough game. It's really fun. It's a great game.
Yeah, I had a couple of runners up too. One of which Adam just mentioned. It was the Star Wars deck building game, which I think is a great deck building game. Personally, just a bigger fan of Star Realms, but Star Wars is outstanding. And my other runner-up is a game that you may have heard of before called Azul. Actually, just kidding. It's the only reason I didn't put Azul in there is because we talk about it so much that I felt bad talking about it again. Although it is a great game, it has a relatively small footprint. And in fact, like I said earlier, I bought the travel version of it specifically because of the small footprint and because it would be easy to travel with. So a great game. I would have had it on my list probably if I hadn't spent so much time talking about it in different contexts.
I will concede to you that the travel version counts as a small footprint game, so we'll let that one ride. I'm just going to talk about one runner-up, and that's because this game has been on my table a lot lately for a small footprint game. And so we have a listener of our show, Chris Stone, and he's been a very active contributor to our social media platforms. He was someone we used to chat with on Twitter, but he's active in our Facebook group. And he got his first game published last year through Kickstarter. He had a successful Kickstarter campaign. And this game is called Hissy Fit. And I know it's a silly name, but it's the concept, the theme of it is that you are basically trying to get your cat to a vet. And so it's it's a cooperative game, and it's the team against the cat who is trying to stop you every way that they can. And the theme is cute, but I have to admit, I didn't expect a lot. I don't love cooperative games. I don't love, I didn't think the theme was really going to trigger for me or hit for me. But what this basically is a very small card-based 20-minute version of one of these disaster mitigation cooperative games. Think like Pandemic. The idea being that you flip after everybody's turn, you flip over a card, some disaster happens, you got to mitigate it. So on your turn, you're spending your actions trying to clean up the mess. Well, the mess here is that the cats are putting on their attitudes. This cat that you're trying to get into your cat box is represented by a little cat token, and it just moves around a card. And so the way that they do difficulty in this game is that there's a number of spaces to get it to the cat carrier. And so if you're playing on like normal mode, it's 10 spaces. So this little cat token, you're trying to play cards that will move it into the cat carrier. And after you take your turn in the cat, you'll flip over one of these cards, and it's usually going to do something. It could scratch you. And one of the losing conditions is you get 5 cat scratches. It could, but it also has an ongoing effect. These cards, while they're out, that might be like you can't move the cat forward, or you can't play combos with your cards or whatever. And all of the cat cards have these symbols on them that represent their attitudes. They're angry symbols or sneaky symbols or stubborn symbols. But these cat cards are represented by fun, like hilarious behavior of cats. Like one of the cards I'm looking at here says Vanish, and it just shows a cat climbing under a dresser, and you can't move it into the carrier anymore. And there's another one that's called Seeing Ghosts, and it shows this cat that's just like freaking out at nothing with its eyes wide open, and then it has a stubborn symbols on it, so you have to clear those out. So once these cat cards are up, they'll put things that'll kind of get in your way of accomplishing your goal. And then on your turn, you play 2 cards or take 2 actions. One of them could be to draw a card, one could be to play cards, but these will give you symbols to get rid of the negative things, get those cards off the table so you can keep moving the cat forward. This was surprisingly interesting and fun. You can combo cards together, so all the human cards that you can play, which are represented by things like a laser pointer. A laser pointer will get rid of the stubbornness because you can draw them into the cat carrier, or a worm spot will get rid of the angry symbols. And then there's this one, I don't know if you guys have ever seen videos of a cucumber. You set a cucumber down behind a cat, and when they turn around and see it, they go jumping into the air. If you haven't seen this, go search for
Seriously?
Cat cucumber. Yeah, check this out. But they have this card as cucumber, and they just show this cat jumping into the air 5 feet with the cucumber there. So really cute theme on this. It actually works really well. It feels like that same level of tension that you get in something like Pandemic, but in literally a 20-minute card game that is pretty small footprint, takes about 5 minutes to set up. And, I'm not a big fan of co-ops. I played this a little bit with my family, and we had a fine time with it, but it's just not what I would go back to. But I will say that I played it solo, and it's great because it's so quick to set up. And when I played it, I just kept going back to it. I literally played it 3 times last night. Once I got into it, I just kept wanting to go back and sit down and try it again. And really fun time with this. So anyway, check this out. Chris is a friend of the show. So if you like cats, if you want a quick little co-op game, check it out. It's still available on GameFound. You can do a late pledge on GameFound, but he's literally shipping them out. So as soon as he gets your late pledge, he'll ship it to you within a week. So if you want to check this game out, get it now. But apparently he's expecting to be on Amazon and some big box stores in the near future. So congrats, Chris, on getting your game published. Thanks for being a part of our community. And I had a really fun time with it. It's called Hissy Fit.
It looks really adorable.
All right, cool. Well, that will wrap up this topic. As always, I do like to give a shout out to a listener who said something nice to us. So if you want to get a shout out on the show, just be nice to us. This is actually a special one, though, because this is from a listener. His name is Mark Johnson. Mark Johnson is a longtime podcaster in the board game world. He's been creating a podcast called Board Games to Go. I think he's on his 20th season. So somewhere around 20 years he's been doing this, well before I even knew that there were podcasts. So he got an early start here. And I ran across Mark on Blue Sky. And when I found out about the show, I went and checked it out. And the first episode I went and listened to, he called us out on the show. He's like, hey, I've been listening to this podcast. So we get to chatting a little bit. And I really appreciate Mark getting us out in front of his community. A couple of his listeners have reached out and said, they found us through him. So Mark, thank you for being a great part of our community. Love interacting with you on Blue Sky. And I actually get a chance to meet Mark in a few weeks. I've got plans to meet up with him while I'm in California. So excited to do that. But Mark sent us a really nice email this week, a very long email. So I'm not going to read all of it. I'm just going to read the first paragraph of it. But we really appreciate it. Said some really nice and I think insightful things about each of us as hosts and how our gaming tastes are similar or different to his. So really great to hear from you, Mark. This is what he said. I'm pleased to finally be sending you some feedback about your excellent podcast. I'm an old timer in this hobby and in podcasting. I'm also picky about what I listen to. Back when I started, I hoped more board game podcasts would start up, and it happened. But most of them aren't for me, since I find them too slick or with too much hype about the next new thing, driving FOMO and consumerism. Even though you guys naturally focus on newer stuff than I often do, your discussions strike me as thoughtful, curious, and honest. They seem to be for your own mutual interest rather than growing your brand. You aren't afraid to criticize either. So Mark goes on to talk about how much of the show he's listened to and gives us, again, some individual comments and insights. Really wonderful to read, Mark. I appreciate you putting the time and effort into that, and so glad that you found us and then I found you. I've been a regular listener for the last 6 months to your show as well. So listeners, if you're looking for another board game podcast, somebody with a much longer experience set in this hobby than we do. He talks about a lot of games that have been around for a while. Check out Board Games to Go. It's a really fun podcast.
Yeah, Mark, thanks for the kind words and taking the time to give us your thoughts. Really, really appreciate it and been enjoying the interactions with him.
Yeah, very deeply appreciated.
All right, great. Well, that will wrap up this episode. If you enjoy the show, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can find us and interact with us on Blue Sky, on our patreon.com account, patreon.com/boardgamehottakes, and on our Facebook group. We'd love to hang out with you all and interact with you there. Until next week, take care, everybody.
Good night, all.
Bye-bye. Yeah, fun pick, Chris. Great tiny little card game you played anywhere.
I'm not Chris.
That's Tim.
Oh, great pick, Tim. Tiny, fun little card game you can play anywhere.
We do look a lot alike. It's easy to